1967, 20th of October, myself and Bob Gimlin were going into Northern California area. It's in the Humboldt County, and this is about 40 miles back in the wilderness. The nearest little settlement is a town called Orleans. There's approximately 17,000 square miles in there that are unmapped, and it's a very primitive area, very rugged area. We had been in this area trying to find evidence of the giant creatures called Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Had went to this particular area because a month before this, they had found 3 different sets of tracks.
Howdy, partners. Well, here we are again in an area of the Six Rivers National Forest in Northern California, hovering over a section of Bluff Creek as it looked back in 1967. This aerial shot is a recreation of an image taken in the early 70s from directly over the portion of Bluff Creek, which is featured in the Patterson Gimlin film. The image was used as a reference guide in conjunction with historical maps, sketches, images, local knowledge, drone footage, and terrain data gathered from Google Earth to create a 3D model of the Bluff Creek landscape as it would have looked that day back in 1967. It's hard to imagine how it all looked back then, as the camera tends to make everything appear closer. But with this model, we'll finally get a better perspective on the surroundings as we retread Roger and Bob's path, from the moment the camera was first turned on that day through to the moment Patty was immortalized and the film ran out. So, throw on some leather chaps, saddle up, and let's take a journey back in time, back to Bluff Creek. Just under 3 years prior to the famous sighting, the landscape was ravaged by the 1964 Christmas floods, triggering landslides which scarred and stripped sections of the surrounding hillsides, ripping trees away from the creek side and creating large expanses of flat alluvial floodplains scattered with forest debris made up of tree trunks, branches, logs, and root balls, perfect for hiding behind. The high number of these sandbars within a relatively short stretch of creek contributed to the confusion over which floodplain Patty actually walked over. Prior to the rediscovery of the site in 2011 by the Bluff Creek Project, several researchers disagreed over which sandbar was the one featured in the famous film. Now, only one researcher wrongly clings onto an alternate film site. And here it is. This sandbar, approximately 870 meters southwest of the actual film site, is where confused Bigfoot researcher M.K. Davis believes the filming location to be. Bob Gimlin himself once said M.K. Davis couldn't identify horse shit from a rock.
They couldn't identify horse shit from a rock, you know.
And he's not wrong. However, if you spend enough time sifting through this area, you may just be unlucky enough to find a Bigfoot fetus, as apparently this is the area to find them. Let's quickly move on before we witness a massacre. You heard a quick snippet of Bob Gimlin there. Audio of Bob and Roger will be interspersed throughout this presentation to help us get a better understanding of what was going on and where they were taking place. Just upstream from MK's nonsense, we approached the base of a large mudslide, which is where Roger seemingly turned his camera on for the first time, capturing a segment of Bob Gimlin astride Bob Heironimus's horse Chico while it drinks some water from the creek.
The days are fairly shortened, and last of September, 1st of October. On a Saturday on October 20th, 1967, we decided to go a lot further back, about 35 miles further back. And so we took a little pack horse and started out shortly after lunch.
First of all, you showed some routine film of your pack horses, didn't you?
Right.
Now, what were you doing filming at that particular time on the pack horse bit?
Well, we hadn't taken any of that particular area there before, and some of these...
You were just taking odd shots then, weren't you?
Just taking some shots of the scenery and of myself and Bob.
When the camera is turned on again, Bob is seen south of a huge mudslide riding north, Here we get a good look at the shadows being cast by Bob's horse as they traverse the old flood debris. Note the shadows falling west to east, indicating a time of approximately 3 p.m. for the 20th of October film date, which seems reasonable if their camp was 4 miles away and they left at 1:30 p.m., as Bob Gimlin states.
We left camp about 1:30 in the afternoon. A sunny, real sunny day, and we got everything packed up in the little pack horse and ate lunch and everything and got started out. And of course Roger was riding in front of me all this time. We were only about 4 miles from where our camp was.
The shot ends with a long pan left up the slide, highlighting the power and effect a mudslide can have on the landscape. While we're here, we may as well take a trip up the slide to get a better view of the surroundings. We can see log jams and forest debris strewn everywhere. It also gives us a better perspective of just how open this section of the creek was. Coming down the slope, we can see the rocky plug directly in front, which still causes large log jams to this very day. Swooping into the third filming location, we begin to get an idea of why Roger had no film left for when it really mattered. Apparently, the ride to the film site was a relaxed affair, as the two cowboys took their time fooling around, filming each other riding amongst the turning colors of the trees.
And that was my 36th birthday, so we were just enjoying the sunshine and the beautiful colors, fall colors of the leaves and the maple leaves and the trees. And Roger was riding in front of me and taking pictures. So we were just enjoying the day and having a good time, and not really thinking about anything but just how pretty, how beautiful it was for October 20th, you know.
And the days were fairly short. We were getting into October then, you know, the first and second part of October, or the first part of October. And so that particular Saturday was a really beautiful, sunshiny Saturday. But by then, the leaves in the fall were starting to turn yellow and red, and the oaks and the underbrush and along the creek. So we left out of there, and of course we were riding along, sunshiny day, warm, and Roger was riding in front of me, and he was occasionally filming me back, followed him, and then he filmed the side of the hills with all the beautiful colors of the fall in it.
The final section of film before we see Patty is of Bob riding east, upstream, and it gives us a good glimpse of the temporary logging road that parallels the creek all the way to and beyond the film site sandbar. This temporary unsurfaced cat trail road was periodically bulldozed and graveled to allow access for logging operations. In the summer season, until October, the road would have been easily drivable by a Jeep or even a logging truck. Once over onto the south side of the creek, we step onto a large, expansive floodplain. This area was used by the loggers as a landing to store, pile, and process the reclaimed logs cleared from the flood damage, along with a makeshift corral for the horses, which the remnants of can still be seen today. Moving quickly past Peter Burns's believed film site on the left, we enter a narrower, shadier stretch of creek, which Roger may have considered too dingy for any potential footage. They continued eastward until the landscape opened back up into the next cluster of flat open sandbars. As the landscape begins to open up, Roger and Bob would have ridden past a big gulch and seasonal feeder stream on their right, which crosses the old Bluff Creek road they were following. Swooping up the gulch slope for a better view, we can see large open areas of sandbar leading into a creek bend. The sandbar on the left was once believed to be the film site location by Bigfoot researcher and author Christopher Murphy. The site had potential due to its open area and shape, but ultimately lacked any of the required space in the northeast direction Patty is seen heading. Next up, on the right, is the general consensus area, also known as the Perez site. A favorable sandbar, often believed to be the correct site due to an old map, which had an X marked by Rene Dahinden in the near vicinity. However, it was unclear if the X indicated the start of the Patty encounter or the end. Some believed the X marked the end of the encounter, logically placing this sandbar as the one Patty walked over. However, it turned out the X actually marked the start, and so excluded this particular sandbar for being too far south. This sandbar does, however, mark the last major bend Bob and Roger rounded before finally filming Patty, rerouting them directly north towards the famous floodplain. From here, we can see how open the approach towards the Patty film site would have been as they followed the logging road. Once around this creek bend, apparently a fetid odor suddenly filled the air, and the rest is history. From here, I'll let Roger and Bob tell the tale as it happened in real time.
Jump to what you first saw that made you excited.
So we just come around what was a big downfall root system of a big tree, and it was about 8-10 feet up. And the creature was standing just about 30 or 40 feet on the other side of the creek.
I caught something out of the corner of my eye, and my horse immediately reared on me, probably pulled him half over, fell with me, and as he got up, I was able to get up and control him until I went around the other side and got the camera out of the saddlebag, and then I turned my horse loose. And then it started moving away from us, walked up the bank and turned around, looked at us again, and I was able to get into my saddlebags and get my camera out and start shooting pictures.
And the creek was only about a little over a foot deep, probably 18 inches deep, and 20 feet across.
When it ran across the creek, I was able to come up on the other side, and I got some fairly good pictures.
Roger had the camera to his eye, so he stumbled and fell down, stabilized himself, and started getting the good, decent film footage that you see. He hollered at me and said, "I've got to relocate, Bob." So I rode across the creek, stepped down off the horse. Roger just got to where he was going to film again. She turned her head as she's walking, never turned the body, just turned the head, and looked at me when I stepped down off the horse.
Was making kind of a big moon-shaped walk to go with the flow of the land, of the mountains, and the way the creek ran there.
I didn't follow her any much further than when my camera ran out of film, and I knew that it was out. And Bob got on his horse and went after her then.
I wanted to get back on the horse. I started to get on, and Roger said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to follow it." He said, "Bob, I ran out of film."
How far were you able to follow her?
I watched her until she went up a road about 300 yards.
Was that the time you broke off the chase, you might say?
Right, that was when I last seen her go around the curve.
We'll get back to where Patty went shortly. But first, let's take a look at the site from up on the slope to the east. This open slope, probably caused by a landslide, was where Rene Dahinden took his famous photo overlooking the film site. He took it back in 1971 when researching and surveying the area. It remains the single most important image in understanding the appearance of the sandbar in the aftermath of the filming. swooping back down and looking north into a narrow, straight section of the creek known as the Bowling Alley. With its imposing steep slopes on each side, we can get a view of the hillside area where Bob Titmus believes Patty returned to watch Roger and Bob cast her tracks later that day.
Roger wanted to go catch his horse to get a poncho off to get underneath it to put film back in his camera, because this was in the afternoon, about 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Roger got underneath the poncho, and I said, well, let's go where we last saw it and see if we might be able to see it again. So we went up a tributary of the creek the way it went, and we didn't see nothing but scuffs in the gravels where it walked, and tipped them over and the dampness was up.
Right.
And we got up there, probably 450 yards or maybe a little farther, and we saw where it had stepped on a big flat rock with a wet foot, and there was half of a footprint on that rock. And then it apparently went right up to the cliffs and up on top of another ridge and mountain. And we found out later on from Bob Titmus that it traveled back down that ridge and apparently sat there and watched us do all of the filming of the footprints and the different things that we did after the sighting that Roger had got filmed back in the camera.
Well, that's the story as told by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. The side where Patty is a real, living flesh and blood creature. But there's another side to the story. Bob Heironimus's take, where he claims he was the man in the suit. Let's hear his side and see where his journey on the sandbar ended.
This is a place they had picked out when they first got there. And so they helped me put the suit on, and Roger said, okay, I'll go over to by this tree over here, and he said, when I tell you to start walking, do your walk. Well, he claimed that my horse was bucking, but my horse didn't know how to buck, but he was jiggling the film up and down. That's why you see it was, jumping up and down. Anyway, he finally stopped, and as I was going by, and we had already determined when I would turn my head and look at him and keep on walking. Well, so I kept on walking through there, and they stopped the film, and there was a big old blowed-off tree there. And I jumped down in that hole, and it was hot, And I think it was around the end of September, around the 1st of October, right in that area. And I was sweating, my God, it was terrible hot. And I was also afraid somebody was going to shoot me, walking down through there. So I yelled, get this son of a bitch off me. And they come running over there and jerked the head of it off and then got me out of it.
The recreation of the Filmsite sandbar seen here was created in conjunction with the Bluff Creek project site survey maps. So, all the major artifacts, such as the ladder tree, red vine maple, smiley stump, big tree, big stump. The four amigos and the leaning stump are all placed accurately in relation to the foreground trees, main log, and debris pile seen in the Patterson Gimlin film. Now we are hovering just over the location where frame 352 was captured, looking back towards the logjam where the filming began, retracing Patty's steps toward the crow's nest to get a view of the scenery, as Patty would have seen it. Here we can introduce some features of the artwork by Michael Rugg, who, along with Bob Gimlin's guidance, created a detailed recreation of the encounter. This artwork helps confirm that the initial sighting took place on a bend in the creek just after the logjam. Well, that's about it for this one. I hope you enjoyed your journey back in time. retracing the route Roger and Bob took that sunshiny day. I'll leave you to enjoy some shots of the scenery. So, thanks for watching. And maybe I'll see you again someday.